former national security advisor, former ambassador to the United Nations, writing most recently at The Telegraph. The Red Sea story is moving all the time. The Maersk shipping line, the container ships, had resumed passage through the Suez Canal and the Red Sea, believing that the U.S. and other security-minded participants could provide some protection from the missiles fired by the Houthis. But now, John, a very good evening to you. The Houthis are in the news, but Iran is the puppet master. Your piece in The Telegraph looked at Iran and what is to be done. Now that Maersk is suspended, we're talking about major parts of the supply chain at risk. What is to be done, John? Good evening to you.
Good evening. Well, the effort by the United States to set up escort convoys through the Red Sea should have been a signal to a rational government in Tehran that they were beginning to mess around a little bit too much, but they couldn't help themselves because they don't think the Biden administration is really up to stopping what the Houthis have been doing, which is increasingly just closing down the shipping route through the Suez Canal and the Red Sea that carries 12% of the world's trade. So over the weekend, the U.S. did finally take military action by destroying 3 Houthi boats. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. And Iran, in fact, earlier today said that it was simply not going to suspend its aid to the Houthis because of their behavior in the Red Sea, acting as if their supplies were unrelated to what was happening in this effort to interrupt commercial traffic. So I think the Biden administration still does not see that the Middle East is one chessboard. And what the Iranians and the Houthis are doing against commercial traffic in the Red Sea is very much of a piece with what Hamas did when it attacked Israel on October the 7th, what Hezbollah is doing in attacking northern Israel from Lebanon right now, and what Shia militia groups in Iraq and Syria are doing when they attack American service members and civilians. So one reason Iran is getting away with it is the administration won't talk about the elephant in the room, and that's Iran's role.
And the reason that the elephant is not discussed is the Iran deal, John? Is it that straightforward?
Well, I think that's still the biggest piece of it. The administration believes, contrary to all evidence, that if only they could make that deal work, Iran would become civilized and sweetness and light would break out in the Middle East. As long as the Ayatollah is in charge, there is no chance of that. And in fact, what they're doing now is they have moved well off the defensive. They're not worried about American sanctions because of their nuclear program anymore. They're now on the offensive against Israel through their surrogates, Hamas and Hezbollah, and increasingly the Houthis in the Red Sea, and against our own forces, American forces, through the Shia militia groups. And at this point, they are undeterred by the White House. And while they're suffering enormous damage from Israel to Hamas in the Gaza Strip, they still don't see the United States as fully committed to Israel or even to the defense of its own naval ships in the Red Sea or its personnel on land in Syria and Iraq.
The Guardian in the British Isles asked this question: will the Red Sea crisis lead to a wider Middle East conflict? We're in one, aren't we, John?
That is precisely correct. Now, I mean, this is a very important point to make. The White House agonizes over not letting the conflict spread, as they say. It has already spread. The level of intensity is not what it might be. And nobody really is looking for this kind of hostilities, but the White House is making no effort to prevent the hostilities by deterring the aggressor. And, you know, the more we give Iran the impression that we're unwilling to take even basic steps to protect ourselves and our allies, imagine the impression that's forming in their mind for the day that's coming sooner rather than later when Iran gets nuclear weapons.
There is a lack of unanimity about the Red Sea. I note that the EU at this point, I mean, subject to tomorrow, is not participating in the guarding of ships or the providing of security. There seems to be a split here. Is that Iran's intention, John? Or is it just collateral damage that there's a split between the allies?
Well, it's certainly not good news, and particularly if it has something to do with Israel, because this is what Iran and other radicals in the region would love to see, to split Israel away from its natural place in the West. So, the European Union, for any Europeans who think that the European Union provides a basis for security in a dangerous world, this is a perfect example why that's a fool's errand.
The UN is meeting on Wednesday, we're told. I don't expect any success out of that, but at this point, the shipping in the Red Sea is not local. It's not regional. It's global. The supply chain is at risk. That extra passage around Africa costs insurance rates, and the customer is going to pay. At this point, what moves the UN to act, John? What moves? They've been keen on acting on Israel. Are they going to move on Iran? Do they make that connection?
Well, I don't think it will happen because there are mutual vetoes that should be exercised. The Russians and the Chinese will protect their clients in Tehran and Tehran's surrogates, the Houthi, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Shia militia. And if the United States still believes in protecting its own interest in the UN Security Council, it should veto anything that tries to limit our efforts to protect our own naval vessels in the Red Sea, commercial ships in the Red Sea, and to do what we need to do to prevent further attacks. And let's be clear, freedom of the seas for the United States is not an abstract concept. We believed in freedom of the seas as foundational to our security even before we were a nation. So this is a huge principle at stake here, not just the economic effects, although they're substantial. And by the way, certainly in the near term, more harmful to Europe than to the U.S., even highlighting this nonsense that Europe won't provide defense to help us in the Red Sea.
At the same time, there is news from London that the United Kingdom and the U.S. are planning or looking at or thinking about or imagining an operation against the Houthis. The United Kingdom is outside of the EU. It's certainly an integral member of NATO. Is that likely to be successive? These are mountainous regions of Yemen. We know this, and they're quite remote, and the Houthis are adept at hiding in those mountains. So can we imagine an operation that would go to the land where the Houthis are and be successful, John?
Well, fortunately, we have control of the air, and while it will not be easy, as you say, for all the important geographical regions, one thing about drones and eyes in the sky is that we will know where they are, and we will have a capacity, I think, to strike very quickly. The Houthi have to pay a price here. I would go beyond that. Certainly, we should locate our attacks there first, but if need be, I think we've got to carry this, as Alexander Haig used to say, to the source. And the source is the regime of the